This is Dr. Richard Ruling here with the Total Health channel that I would encourage you to like or subscribe to, so you will get notice of when we're having another video. Appreciate the fact that over 18,000 people have seen the previous video dealing with Mark Finley and David Gates on the discussion of end-time events. And this is a further discussion. It's you might title it End-Time Prophecy, Fatal Errors for Christians and Seventh-day Adventists in regarding Rapture, Kingdom, Bride of Christ, the beasts, Babylon, and the covenant. We're going to look at these concepts as we talk briefly, and I hope that I can make it clear. It was my privilege a few years ago, as I visited a church one Sunday morning, that I told the pastor, who gave a great sermon, that I wonder if he would be open to my having a Bible class on prophecy. He said, "No, we don't do prophecy, but if you like prophecy, go to the Adventists, they're into it more." I did not tell him that I had a Seventh-day Adventist background, but the fact is that too many churches are looking at a rapture and they don't think they're going to be around for the end time, and they really don't study Revelation or Daniel. That's the book that Christ said to study and understand when speaking of end times, because Revelation had not been given yet, but in Revelation we find similar imagery of beasts, just like in Daniel's 7th chapter. So we're going to look at a few concepts today, starting with the idea of the rapture. I think that's how many Christians, even Adventists, have their roots in an 1844 disappointment when their pioneers thought they would be raptured to heaven. The message they gave in 1844 was the bridegroom comes. Well, yes, we believe he's coming, but maybe not, as the wedding parables have been misunderstood as a rapture, when really it's not that way. I want to just discuss it very briefly with you. The rapture, for example, is best seen in timing in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 51 and 52, when it says, "We shall all be changed in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trump." Well, there are 7 trumpets in Revelation. You can see them, the start of them is in Revelation 8:5, where there's an earthquake, and then the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets prepare to sound. We have not seen that huge earthquake that's going to shake the heavens and the earth, according to Joel 3:16 rather. And in Joel 2:10 and 11, there's an earthquake that initiates the day of the Lord, the end time period. It will be huge, and we haven't seen it, so we're really not in the end times yet, but we need to get prepared so we will know what to do at that point. And the wedding is not then about a quick snatch to heaven. Acts 14, verse 22 says we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom. And the word kingdom brings us to the second topic. We have a misunderstanding of the kingdom. We think that that's when Christ comes in the sky and we're going to all be his. Well, that's not exactly, from a biblical perspective, that's not what Christ was thinking of when he talked about the kingdom, because he says, search the scriptures, they testify of me. And there is a kingdom in the Old Testament of how God did it. Okay, he came to Egypt and he executed judgment and took his people to a covenant. And he said in Exodus 19, verse 5 and 6, if you'll keep my covenant, you'll be to me a kingdom. Okay, that's how we become his kingdom, is by receiving and accepting his covenant. Unfortunately, Israel assumed too much. They jumped to conclusions. They thought, well, this is a piece of cake. And they said, yeah, whatever the Lord says, we'll do. Well, they didn't know their own hearts, and God allowed them to see what was really in their own hearts when 40 days later they worshipped a golden calf and very debauched type of situation. And that must not happen to Christ, okay? We need to understand ahead of time what he expects from us in sort of a prenuptial agreement. It's so that we know what he wants and that we anticipate doing it. It's not just about cake in heaven when he comes in the sky. So that is a brief discussion of kingdom. It says in Daniel 2:44, "In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom." That's not after 7 last plagues when no king is standing. It's in our time, so to speak. So let's keep an open mind, look at Scripture carefully. The rapture will occur at the last trump, when we which are alive and remain will be caught up. Okay. Now, coming to the third concept of Babylon. Okay. Let me back up and say this. I said the kingdom is not what we think. Christ, when he came in the first advent 2,000 years ago, said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, the merciful," and so on. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And if we surrender to Christ and we invite him into our hearts, yes, we have his kingdom in us, so to speak. The kingdom means dominion of a king, and he can have dominion in our hearts. But that's not what the disciples were looking for in Acts 1, verse 6. When they were going up the hill the last time with Christ and he was about to be taken, he said, "Are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel at this time?" Christ's reply was that it's not for you to know the times or seasons. And that phrase is critical to understand because it's only found one previous time in Daniel 2, verse 21, where God sets up kingdoms, the times and seasons for setting up kings and taking them down. And so the disciples were right, and Christ's reply is about an external kingdom. They wanted to see the power of what God was going to do for Israel again. And I believe we can see we're online for good stuff, okay? And it's not just the quick snatch to heaven. In Revelation 11, verse 3, God is going to give his side in this controversy between good and evil. "I will give my two witnesses power for 1,260 days. And they have power to shut the heavens and turn water to blood in verse 6. So there's a 3.5-year period when God's side is going to be good. And then the next verse, verse 7 of Revelation 11, says, and when they finish their testimony, the beast ascends out of the bottomless pit to make war and to overcome them. The intent is to overcome. But I don't think the beast is going to overcome us if we are sealed properly with the covenant relationship to him. The beast gets equal time in Revelation 13:5. It says power was given him to continue 42 months. And a recent video by Mark Finley disparaged that 42 months and thought it was all past. But favorite author of mine says that the prophecies of Revelation in their order. And in their order means that verse 3 comes first before verse 5. And that's when the deadly wound heals. We're seeing the deadly wound healed as Lutherans held joint communion with the Catholic Church last fall. And that wound is healing, basically. So then power is given to continue. And so we come then to the next word in this end time prophecy thing, and that's the beasts. There are 3 beasts in Revelation 13. Historically, most early pioneers of America considered that the first beast was the papacy, that they fled from the old world. There was persecution. Conservative historians say 50 to 100 million Christians were martyred, Protestants really, for their being a heretic. That's when the state or the governments did the Pope's bidding. But it was a bad situation, and when America opened up, Protestants came here as opposed to every country south of our border, which was Catholic. And so this is the one country that has done so well, so to speak, in 152 years from when the Constitution was ratified and came into effect in 1789 to World War II in 1941, when we entered the war and became the greatest country to save Europe, which was on its, and England was on its knees with Hitler bombing it nightly, but we saved the day for the whole world at that point. And great nation, but we have since that time been going downhill morally, and Proverbs, Solomon says, righteousness exalts a nation. Well, we're no longer righteous with the abortions, 60 million, etc. Lots of things I could say at this point, but won't go there. The bottom line is that the papacy is the first beast from the sea. Sea represents waters, peoples, nations, and tongues. So that's in Revelation 17, verse 15. And it was in the old world, populated area. Then comes a land beast out of land opposite of sea, unpopulated, not nations, multitudes, and tongues, but America, come out of a wilderness, basically. And it had 2 horns like a lamb, but they had no crowns. Government without a king, church without a pope, Protestant America. And it says it caused fire to come down from heaven. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and it caused the world to make an image of the previous beast. Okay, the Bible says 2 or the prepositions in Greek are not there, so that it doesn't say whether the image is made to or of. And I believe that we make an image of the previous beast. And New World Order will look like Old World Order, basically. It's because so many Catholic countries are, will sway the vote, and the Pope looks tolerant to everything. So everybody's going to favor the Pope's leadership, and he will ride that beast of New World Order, as seen in Revelation 17, verse 3. All the clues in Revelation 17 are just, it's impossible to escape the idea. If you understand that a woman represents a church, and an impure woman, a harlot, represents an unfaithful church. Here is a church that is involved with, this is fornication with kings, involved with politics, trying to get all these governments to do their bidding and make laws so that everybody can be holy according to the papacy, whose doctrines are as phony as a $3 bill, basically. And so we won't go into that at this point, except that the clues include a woman dressed in scarlet. Well, that's the color of cardinals. Decked with gold. Well, that's the wealth in the Vatican Bank that they won't even open up and let you know what's in it. It says mother of harlots. Well, mother church, and of abominations. And some of the abominations we see might include the World War II, where Hitler signed a concordat with the Pope, so that if he won the war, the whole world would be Catholic. Well, they're strategizing still, and this time it's through the UN to rule the world, and they will get it. At the bottom of the pyramid on our $1 bill says Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages, or New World Order. So we're getting there. People don't see it. Patriots think we're going to take the country back, but that's not God's way. God doesn't want fighting, and half the population is doing wrong. We say, God bless America, but can he bless what he's cursed? I don't think so. So it's not going to be that way. By the way, I have a book title, God Bless America, and I would like to recommend it. If you want to get a copy, you can go to my website, Richard Ruhling, last name spelled RUHLING.com, and for a minimal donation, I have a number of things there. Low cost, just want to give you something in return. And but that's enough for now. So we've covered now 3 concepts: the bride of Christ in the wedding parables. We've covered the kingdom and how we become a kingdom by making a covenant. We've covered the beast, 3 of them in Revelation 13. We have Babylon, and that's really not a city in Iraq. The New Testament Babylon is named in Revelation 17. We've been talking about it as the papacy. But the confusion is that it's not just religion. It's actually about 5 or 6 entities. And there's the money system, the economy will be confused. And it says Babylon is fallen. We're going to see a collapse of our economic system because it's just based on paper and credit. Not good, not like it was in Bible time when there was gold or silver behind whatever they did. And then comes the idea, I mentioned religion, but there's education. Bad education in public schools today, teaching perverted forms of life and relationships and gender, so that this is not God's doing. This is abomination, you know. And then it's a sad thing that we don't have a better model, which we should be able to see, that is based on good principles of teaching, and I think the Bible would be included. But they got rid of the Bible in the classrooms, which I think that was, if I may say, that it was probably the Catholic Church behind it, because the Second Commandment forbids the use of images, and their churches are full of them. It also clearly states that the Sabbath is the 7th day of the week to worship, And the Rome is now promoting Sunday as the Lord's Day and the Sabbath. Well, they're not saying, the Sabbath commandment says it's the seventh day, but Sunday is the first day. Well, a lot of confusion there. And so, bottom line, Babylon is economy, education, government. Governments are fallen. We have, God, over the Supreme Court, we see Moses as the central figure with the Ten Commandments representing good and wise laws, but that Supreme Court has mocked God with the laws that they have approved, and we're on the way down, basically. Also, there's a matter of health care. In Revelation 18, where there's a call out of Babylon, verse 24 says, "For by her sorceries were the nations deceived." And the Greek word for sorcery is pharmakeia. So this is Babylon, okay? And sadly, the healthcare system in this country, if we see our doctor, ask our doctor like the ads say, we're getting what we really don't want. I can give you a quick testimony that my former wife had a bladder infection, got a little impatient with it, went to her doctor, got a prescription, cured her bladder infection, but a few months later got some spots under her skin. Bad situation. Her bone marrow was wiped out by that drug she'd previously taken, and she died of a stroke. And I went through U.S. Senate offices with medical literature to show that medical care is the leading cause of death, until one senator said, you're wasting your time. They own us. Speaking of the donations that the drug companies give to their reelection. So this is Babylon, basically. This country is just like Babylon. Rome has an obelisk in its square. We have the Washington Monument, and they have it in England too, the Trafalgar Square, so that we might represent the religious, the economic, and the military aspects of the New World Order with these three nations. Anyway, that's it in a nutshell for Babylon, and we've talked about the beast, the kingdom, and the bride. The last is the covenant that I want to come to, because the covenant is really the basis of the kingdom and the marriage. And we don't see it, but when the bridegroom comes, there must be an instant readiness for the wedding. That's the imagery of Luke 12, verse 36 and 37. It says that, be ready when I come from the wedding and knock. You must open immediately. Blessed is that servant whom his Lord finds watching. He will gird himself and make them sit down to eat, and will come forth and serve them. So the point is, big event. What is the knock? Okay. Well, since the Bible explains itself, it's its own expositor, there's only one other place where Christ knocks in the New Testament, and it's in Revelation 3:20. We all know it. We love the little meaning we've got from Campus Crusade for Christ, that Christ is at the door of our heart knocking, and that we just surrender to Him. And that's a good meaning. That's not a bad meaning. But the Bible is a book of depth, and it has a greater understanding if we know more about it. That lukewarm church that kept Christ outside knocking and was not open to Him ended in an earthquake around 63 A.D. in Asia Minor. There was a city of Laodicea, and you can Google it and look at the pictures of the stone columns falling down. Bad earthquake, and this is how I believe Laodicea is going to end, okay? And my favorite author had a vision of that earthquake, and it was, she said it seemed that Judgment Day had come. So bad situation. She further described the midnight cry, like Egypt, when they had a midnight cry and death fell on the Egyptians. She described it as a sudden, unlooked-for calamity. So if we understood more of Scripture, we could be ready. Her clue was citing Zephaniah 1:8 that says, in the day of the Lord's sacrifice, God will punish the king's children. Well, I'm from a Seventh-day Adventist background, and they think they're the king's children. Well, I think punishment because of apostasy, basically, and she made numerous statements to that effect, that the church was turned back from following Christ and is steadily retreating toward Egypt. That was in Volume 5, page 217. In Volume 8, when they voted a hierarchical system like the Catholic Church, her disappointment was extreme, and she said, how has a faithful city become a harlot? My Father's house is made a house of merchandise, a place whence the divine presence and glory have departed. And she, 2 years later, said the church would be in apostasy till the Lord comes, descends from heaven with a shout. Those were her words. And we don't see it. We think maybe it's going to turn out good. I just say I would rather trust someone that I believe was inspired than I would trust the people in Washington who have been infiltrated heavily by Jesuit influence. So, bottom line, we need a better understanding of the covenant. In fact, in her last book, Ellen White's description of church, even her title is different. I would bet that 99.9% of the people I'm talking to, thousands of you maybe, do not know the title Ellen White gave her last book. She titled it's Prophets and Kings by your title, but I visited a White estate in the General Conference. Downstairs in a glass case on the far right is a blue book with gold letters, The Captivity and Restoration of Israel. I said, what's this? Well, they said, that's Prophets and Kings. We just changed the title after she died, of course. So, bottom line in that book, let me first say that the title that she chose, Captivity and Restoration of Israel, is based on Jeremiah 30, verse 3, and I'll quote it. God says, Lo, the days come, saith the Lord, that I'll bring again the captivity of my people, Israel and Judah, and cause them to return to the land that I gave their fathers, and they shall possess it. Verse 11 says, I'm with you to save you, though I make a full end of all other nations. I will not make a full end of you. Well, I don't want to be here when the full end is made. I'll just say that. It's going to be bad. The forces that are coming into this country and the forces that are already active, and I'll give you the example of Paradise. If you went to YouTube and typed in D-E-W, or lasers, you can see that there's a beautiful street with houses all burned down, but the trees around them are all standing. This was not a forest fire. This was lasers that burned out those houses, and the government, deep state, CIA, and the control of the weapons that they're using is a bad situation, seeking to tear America apart so that they can justify UN troops, peacekeepers, New World Order, and that's how it's going to be coming. In my opinion, I could be wrong. I just say search and see, but don't take everything that you've always thought as what it will always be, because we haven't managed to do it in 170 years in the Church of Adventism. And when the bridegroom comes, the message is, go ye out to meet him. Okay? It's not about a church or a denomination. It's about a movement that God is going to have, and it will be with a covenant-keeping people. And in Ellen White's last book, she says what God purposed to do for the world through Israel, the chosen nation, he will finally accomplish through his church on earth today, even his covenant-keeping people. And that right now we don't have a covenant. We haven't made the covenant. It comes in the context of when he comes and knocks. The earthquake at that point is when we will need to make the covenant with God. The message of the earthquake will be, fear God, give glory to him. The time of his judgment is come. And that time of judgment on Egypt was also a time for the covenant when they became God's kingdom. So look forward to it. She says in her last statement that what God purposed to do, he will accomplish through a covenant-keeping people. She says, to them will be fulfilled all the covenant promises made by Jehovah to that ancient people. So that's it in a broad picture. I'd like to suggest one more book, The Destruction of Jerusalem, and I believe that if we keep our eyes open, we could see that next spring as a heads up for giving the message the bridegroom comes. Because Titus came at Passover in the spring, surrounded the city when there were millions of Jews in the city then. And I believe there will be a repeat with Zechariah 14:1 says, the day of the Lord comes, and I'll gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. The houses will be rifled, the women ravished, half the city will go into captivity. Serious events for the end time, and I think we need to try to warn our friends that are living in Jerusalem. But after that happens, it says, then the Lord will go forth and fight against them. And I believe he will roar from Jerusalem as an earthquake. It says, Joel 3:16, the Lord will roar from Zion the heavens and earth will shake, and I think it'll chase the bad people out, and I think that his roar initiates the end time for us and a need of our covenant. That will be a month later. Thank you for considering this. Please go to my website, richardruling.com, if you want, and if you do, you can get a free book, Why You Shouldn't Ask Your Doctor. Just leave your email. You'll get my emails. And then if you got health issues, that book offers almost 100 different topics on alphabetically, allergies, arthritis, things like that, for what you can do. And thank you for doing that. Hope to keep in touch. Like this video and follow it, subscribe to it.